And good afternoon and welcome to Lambda Weekly. I'm Dave Taffet here in the studio with Lerone Landis and the late Patti Fink, and our guest is Jayla Wilkerson. Jayla is an artist, an activist, an attorney, and I chose those words because they're all A words.
That's awesome.
Alliteration.
She's a triple threat.
That's right, a triple threat.
One of the things Jayla did last week was Transgender Day of Remembrance. We talked about that with Katie and Leslie last week, and it was a lovely event. It was held this year at the J. Eric Johnson Library downtown, and Jayla, one of the organizers, but also emceed the whole evening. We started inside, nice and warm in the library, and then she sent us all outdoors.
In the cold.
It was freezing.
And dark.
Okay,
and scary.
Whose brilliant idea was that?
That was mine. Historically here in Dallas, we do our Transgender Day of Remembrance, and we end it with kind of a candlelight vigil at the Legacy of Love monument. But we've held the event generally somewhere in the or around the neighborhood. And this year we were in the library primarily because I had Transgender Pride at that library, and it was such a wonderful space that some of my fellow committee members suggested, hey, why don't we do TDoR here as well, just because it is roomy enough to house a lot more people, and it's an event that's growing in terms of turnout. And so we didn't want to lose participation trying to drive all the way from downtown to the neighborhood to do the Legacy of Love monument, and we decided we're right across the street from City Hall. We can just go over there and it'll be the same kind of symbolic gesture of meeting in a public outdoor space with our candles to remember those who have fallen.
And a number of people have fallen this year.
25 in America.
And 369 worldwide.
Correct.
Who were killed, as far as we can tell, for no other reason than they were transgender.
That's correct.
And that's just in 2018.
Well, that's from whenever they stopped counting for TDoR last year until they stopped counting for this year. So,
but in the last 12 months.
Exactly.
In the last 12 months. And, I mean, that is a horrible number. The other thing about all of these deaths is that most of them are unsolved.
That's correct as well. It's usually very difficult. And so, I mean, it's often difficult to even determine for sure what the cause or the reason behind it was, which is why it's so difficult to prosecute hate crimes, for example, is because you have to prove that the malicious intent was there because of a protected class.
Okay, now, we said activist, now the attorney is coming in.
Yes, I'm very much, it's all integrated, and if you want me to paint a picture of it, I will. But,
because, Patti, remember Artitude that was here a few months ago, and Maricón was one of the projects that they were doing at the Latino Cultural Center. We had somebody who was here who had put it together. Jayla was one of the artists.
Fantastic.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I had three paintings there, actually. One of which was the Turtle Creek Chorale. I painted, some of the singers and a pianist, and it had the city skyline in the background. Another of which was a French bulldog puppy that I painted that my girlfriend Heather actually purchased at an art show that we had at Kettle Art in Deep Ellum. And then the third one was kind of a loosely based self-portrait of myself. It's called The Daily Struggle, and it's a trans woman looking into a mirror, trying to get ready for the day, shaving her face. She's got her wig beside her. She's got huge muscles, which I don't have, but that's a thing that often trans women are concerned about, is kind of the masculine physique that they're trying to hide.
So now that we just completely derailed what we were talking about.
So let's get back on track.
Okay.
So, we're talking about trans murders, and I was wondering, when a trans individual is found dead, aside from, determining fairly quick that this was a homicide, is it fairly automatically assumed that this may have been a hate crime also?
No. Again, you have to, it depends on what you mean by assumed, right? Like, the community might assume that it's a hate crime.
Right.
The community might even be almost certain that it's a hate crime. But in order to prosecute it as such, we would have to know, first of all, who did it, which we very rarely do know. Correct. And then we would have to know what their motivation was for doing it. And they would have to have made some kind of an utterance or some kind of a... So a perfect case for a hate crime would be somebody who posted on Facebook some derogatory terms toward a transgender person, and I'm going to kill that person because of these feelings I have against transgender people, right? That would be a perfect situation for proving that it was a hate crime, but that's so rarely the case. Often, if you do get a hate crime for LGBT-related things, it's often because somebody was there, an eyewitness, that heard some slurs coming from the mouth of the person that did the killing, which, again, very, very rare. And most of these transgender murders that we have, like David was saying, are completely unsolved. We don't even know who did them, let alone necessarily why.
And some trans murders have been proven to be from former love interests.
Right.
And are those even more difficult to prosecute as a hate crime? Because the argument could be, well, you knew that this individual was trans.
Absolutely, that's right. And of course that brings up another issue, which is the transpanic defense. And that's for the lovers who didn't know and they found out, or allegedly did. You know, as far as we know, they found them on a transgender dating site, but the argument goes from their side that, well, you know, I thought this was a beautiful woman, I took her to the hotel or whatever, and she had a penis, and so I freaked out so much that when I killed her, I'm not fully culpable of murder because it was kind of her fault for having a penis, which is another huge issue that we're actually battling nationwide. There are several states that are working on legislation to prevent gay panic and transpanic defenses.
And it's been pretty widely, I guess they're coming around nationwide on the gay panic defense. Oftentimes judges will throw that out before the trial ever begins across the country. Not to say everywhere in the country, but many places they're affirmatively rejecting that before the trial even gets going.
That's true, but there's nothing to prevent them legally. Whereas there are certain things that you legally cannot say in front of a jury, for example. And so what the legislation is trying to do is to make this an enumerated thing that cannot be said in front of a jury to try to reduce the punishment.
I think that's fantastic to get that off, get that completely out of the equation.
Absolutely.
Because legally, there are some laws that justify killing someone, like self-defense, standing your ground.
Right.
But gay panic isn't one, or shouldn't be one.
Correct. And in the state of Texas, it's a little nuanced because what we have is a sudden passion defense, and it's not really a true defense because it doesn't make you not guilty. If you use the sudden passion defense, what it does is it lowers the culpability. So, for example, instead of homicide, it might be manslaughter,
right,
or something like that. And so that's the way it's used mostly here in Texas. But different states, of course, have different laws, and so the defense kind of works differently.
Now, of the 25 murders over the last year, one of them was in Dallas, but one of the people who was counted, or wasn't she counted, about a week after that,
Nicole Hall?
Yes.
Yeah, she was not counted among the 25 American names. She was actually listed, if you remember, at TDoR we had the PowerPoint slide that was showing all of the names throughout the world, and she was actually listed in one of those slides, but it's questionable whether she was murdered or whether she committed suicide. And so the people who organized the list of names for the United States, which I think are associated with HRC these days, they determined that there wasn't enough evidence that she was murdered to include her in the names for America. But it's always arguable. And there was another case, and I don't remember the name, but it was pretty recently, of a person that was identified as a gay man here locally that was murdered, but he would cross-dress from time to time, and was certainly not bound by gender the way that society would have us to be. And so some were asking whether he would be included, and then ultimately, he was not determined to be transgender, so that's why he didn't get included in Transgender Day of Remembrance.
Yeah. But for the people who don't remember it, first there was a murder. It was up just off of LBJ, and her name was Carla Pavone?
That's correct. She was a Hispanic transgender woman, and she was murdered in her own apartment.
And then it was a week later that they found this body in White Rock Creek hanging from a tree.
And she was unidentified at first. In fact, her body was so badly decomposed that they didn't think they were ever going to be able to identify her. But so the Dallas Police Department put out all the information that they had and made it available on social media, and a lot of people shared it to try to find out if anybody knew. Anybody within the trans community, a lot of us were posting on Facebook and saying, hey, check on your friends, anybody that would have been in this area, make sure they're okay. And that's how it was actually found. I actually know one of the people who realized she hadn't heard from this particular friend, and it was Miss Hall.
Wow.
And it was interesting, the Dallas Police Department's reaction to these. One trans murder was bad, and they were very serious about solving it. When there was another death a week later, it was like, oh no, not here. No.
Correct.
And they poured extra resources into solving that one because they really didn't know whether it was a murder or a suicide. They're tending to believe the second one was a suicide.
Correct. I think that was the final determination that they made. I don't know that for 100%, but I believe that's the case. And you remember at roughly the same time period, there was a killing spree of transgender women in Florida. And so I think the concern was that same kind of a killing spree might have been started here in Dallas, and they wanted to get on top of it as soon as they could.
Right. They were taking nothing for granted. And the two murders had nothing to do with each other, or the two
as far as we know. Yeah.
As far as we know, had nothing to do with each other. The first one was solved, though, wasn't it? The
Yes.
actual murder.
Yes.
Do you remember what happened there?
I honestly don't, because there are so many that I feel like I'm conflating
former
them.
partner?
I believe that's correct, yes.
Yeah.
And if I remember right, she was murdered and then her body was set on fire inside of her apartment.
Something like that, yeah.
And I believe they caught her killer in Huntsville. I remember if that's the case.
I think you may be right.
He had property on him that belonged to her, clearly her property. And that was
That's how they put them together.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's right. Well, there was one that was last year, Guinevere Riversong, who was murdered in Waxahachie by her own father. And so talk about hate crime. My understanding, based on my recollection, was he had been in prison for a period of years, and she transitioned during that time, and this was one of the first times that he had seen her as his daughter, and it was at his apartment. Her parents had been divorced for some time.
Years.
Yes,
Yeah.
and anyways, he, the father, kind of freaked out and shot her in the face with a firearm.
Oh, wow.
And then was no billed.
Yeah, then the grand jury in Waxahachie was presented that case by the district attorney's office, and they returned a no bill, which means that they determined that there wasn't enough evidence that a crime had been committed.
That's insane.
That's
How much
beyond
more
insane.
evidence did you? Oh my God!
Yeah, and I was actually at one of the planning meetings for TDoR, and one of my fellow committee members told me that, and it was, just within minutes, I had tears streaming down my face. I couldn't believe just the utter injustice. One of these trans murders, we know exactly who did it, exactly why they did it. You would think that would be one of these cases where we could prove a hate crime, and instead the grand jury. And so that's the thing that I think is important for people to understand, is whenever we don't have justice in the LGBT community for crimes against us, it's not always the police department. It's not always a judge. It's not always, there are so many moving parts. And in this case, the ball fell at the grand jury. Now,
Yeah, that one was solved immediately.
Absolutely.
We knew exactly what happened, what he did, why he did it.
Absolutely.
The question had to do with, they said that Guinevere came to the house and was aggressive.
Right. So it
So
may
that's
have been
justifiable?
That justified being
killing
shot in
your
the
kid.
face.
according to
killing
the
the
grand jurors in Waxahachie. Now the question is, how was the case presented to the grand jury? Because the district attorney has the discretion of how they present the case, and they
Correct.
often they'll ask for a no bill. I don't know if that was the case in this situation, but it's something that I think that the public there, who has the voice of the vote there, needs to pay attention to.
So this man is walking around free now.
Absolutely.
Has been
Wow.
all along.
That's just insane.
Yeah.
It makes it feel like we're living in the Old West, or we're living in the Deep South, where they can kill somebody and there are no consequences
None
whatsoever. It is the West. It is yes.
I think she was referring to a time period.
One of the other things, and we only have 2 minutes before we need to take a break, but there were several speakers at Transgender Day. One of the people who was on, who came up to speak, her story really shocked me because she was almost the victim of a crime, and police intervened and saved her.
Right. That was Stacey Monroe.
Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about the story. Do you know it at all?
I really don't. I really don't. And so I had asked her to speak. What topic? I don't even remember specifically. But she's actually running for mayor. It's my understanding.
Oh, is she really?
And I met her through the Stonewall Democrats, and we were on a panel together about trans issues. And she was just very eager to get involved in the community, and so I asked her to come and speak, and I had no idea she was going to tell that personal story, which I had not heard before, and I was so busy emceeing and, you know what I mean, organizing and making sure the speakers were lined up that I honestly didn't.
And basically the story was that a gunman came to her house to kill her because she was trans, and somehow the police intervened quickly enough and stopped this.
Stranger?
Which is, it's awesome that
somebody that she knew.
Somebody she knew.
That story is getting told, because, I mean, as a prosecutor, I saw several cases where there was a transgender victim and the police did the right thing and they were able to find the assailant and they were able to get justice, and those aren't the stories that we hear. And I think that causes a lot of negativity within the community that doesn't necessarily need to be there, because we need to start talking about the good things as well, so it gives us hope and you know, that spark.
And you're listening to Lambda Weekly on 89.3 Knon FM. I'm Dave Taffet here in the studio with Lerone Landis and the late Patti Fink. Our guest is Jayla Wilkerson. We'll be back with more right after this.
This is Rollins Gelland, and I'm listening to Lambda Weekly on 89.3, and darn glad to be doing it.
And welcome back to Lambda Weekly. We're talking to Jayla Wilkerson. She is, or was, an assistant district attorney in Dallas County.
That is correct.
And you can talk about that now.
You're kind of between.
Well, but the verb is past tense. I am no longer employed by Dallas County, and what Dave was talking about is a conversation we had off the air about how while I was working there, you know, I was working for a politically elected office, and so my activism and stuff was kind of had a little bit of a issues of visibility and things, because if I did anything where I was talking about my job and who I worked for and whatever, then I ran the risk of getting in trouble for presenting an opinion or whatever of the office inadvertently, right?
And when you work in the DA's office, you have to be fair. You have to have that presentation that you're going to listen to actual evidence.
Absolutely.
And not let your own personal feelings about any issue get in the way.
Absolutely.
So we understand that. However, it didn't get in the way because there haven't been any big transgender cases here in Dallas until last week.
Right.
Or two or 3 weeks ago. So tell us what happened.
Well, actually, that case came up about a year ago that Valerie was, my understanding is she was going to the Love Field Airport and she inadvertently had a gun in her handbag. And
because she was being stalked.
Because she was being stalked and she didn't feel that the police were protecting her enough, because they said that not enough had been done for them to intervene. And so
what they said was basically, until you're harmed, we can't protect you.
Right, which is kind of ridiculous.
So,
what she should have been advised that she could get a protective order or something like that, probably. I don't know the details of the stalker or what the situation was, but anyways, at the end of the day, she was carrying a gun for self-protection. She forgot it was in her handbag. She was going somewhere. She went to the airport with a gun, which is illegal. I absolutely understand. I'm sure that some listeners think, how do you not know you have a gun in your handbag? I had a gun in my briefcase one time, and I took it to the University of Pennsylvania Law School because I forgot it was there. And that's illegal too, and I just admitted to a crime, but it was more than 7 years ago, which is the statute of limitations. We're good. Anyways, so that's the thing that happens, and I don't know the numbers, but I'm sure it happens relatively often, and it's so innocuous that, in fact, the grand jury no-billed it. They decided a crime had not occurred. But she was arrested for it, which is protocol, and she was taken to the jail, and she was very, very badly mistreated by our Dallas County Jail.
Now, we have a policy, it's 9 pages long, that Lupe Valdez, I'm saying she wrote, but her office wrote them. Yeah.
Well, she had a lot of influence from other people. The woman that organizes Trans Pride Initiative in Dallas, which is it's a nonprofit organization that does work for transgender inmates specifically, and she was involved in the writing of it, and I think that one of the people over at Resource Center was involved in the writing of it. So the sheriff's office sought out input from the community.
And it's a wonderfully written document.
Right.
Only they followed it. Because from page 1, line after line after line, and I went through the whole thing and I went through the lawsuit, line after line, those policies were violated.
Absolutely. And I actually had a conversation with...
Which you couldn't say had you still been working for the prosecutor's office.
Right. Well, right.
Well,
Anyways.
how were they violated?
Oh, in so many ways. So the policy, first and foremost, was based on PREA, which is the Prison Rape Elimination Act, which it's a federal statute that was based on transgender inmates being raped in prison, and it's to protect the transgender inmates and all other inmates. And so the policy is based on that. And one of the main tenets of the policy is you don't decide your housing based on genitalia. And one of the things is, for Dallas County specifically, there's supposed to be a medical screening and some other things that are supposed to happen before housing is determined for everybody, not just for transgender people. So the thing that's important to me, I think, in this case is when she was booked in initially, they didn't know she was transgender. She's not somebody that you just look at and you think, oh, wow, that's a transgender person. It just looks like a woman like anybody else. So she's going through this process where a man, my understanding, was filling out a questionnaire, and one of the questions on the questionnaire related to her menstrual cycle. And my understanding, based on my questions, is that they need to know where they're at in their menstrual cycle based on, what things they're taking into the facility inside of them. And she said...
Well, and also, if you're going to be there a day or two, will you need any feminine hygiene products? I mean, it's not meant to be an invasive question. It's just meant to be...
Makes sense.
While you're here, will you need...
Sure.
Right.
And there's a purpose for the question. She answered the question by saying that she didn't have a menstrual cycle. The person questioning her asked her why. She said, because I don't have a uterus, because I'm transgender. And he said, my understanding is, well, why does your documentation say you're a female? Well, because I am a female. I just happen to be a transgender female. So right here, you know that there's training problems.
Right.
Absolutely.
But you don't even have to be trans to be a female with no uterus.
Absolutely.
That's true.
Good God.
Right, exactly. Again.
That to me is just insane.
But
there was so much wrong to go around in this whole situation. But everything was violated from they're instructed to use the pronoun that the person requests. So, Lerone, if you want to be called they, they'll call you they. They don't care. This policy just says, or the purpose of this policy more than anything is, there's going to be a lot of violent people who come through the jail. Why start something? Somebody wants to be referred to a certain way, just refer to them that way.
Right.
What's the difference?
Right.
I see the rationale as something completely different, and that's dignity of persons.
Absolutely.
Oh, no. Right. Of course. I'm going from the jailer's point of view. From the prison guards who check people in, I'm talking about from their point of view. They have no reason to have acted the way they did. Other things that violated the policy, you can't just strip search just because you decide you want to. There has to be a written order for a strip search.
Which they did. They did without. They made her take her panties off.
Right.
To see what her plumbing was like.
Which I learned last week, because a lot of people didn't know the difference between just a general body search and a strip search. And I guess when you get arrested, they do a general search.
Right. Well, every person who's arrested while they're being processed is looked at without clothing. No, looked at without clothing, but that's done generally in an individual curtained off area with a person of the gender of your choosing. That's what it's supposed to be.
Okay.
And it's for the purpose of making sure you're not carrying anything into the jail that you shouldn't be carrying into the jail.
Makes sense.
And it's a real quick turn your head and cough kind of a thing, but that isn't what happened to Valerie.
And the other thing that we were talking about last week, there are two types of intakes. One of them, you're going to a general holding room because you're going to be making bail within 3 hours,
right,
and you're out of there. And that's where Valerie was going. She was not a danger to anybody. The gun had already been confiscated. So there was no need for any of this. She was just going to go sit in a holding room, watch TV for a couple of hours, and she was going to be bailed out.
And so how did they do her strip search?
Well, they made her, first they asked her whether she'd had all of her surgeries, quote unquote, and she said yes to avoid embarrassment, and the guy didn't believe her. And
another thing is, if you're not telling the truth, that cannot, and not just should not, but cannot be held against you, because they understand you're in a very vulnerable position right here. You're probably a nervous wreck, and you might say something that is untrue. It cannot be held against you in any way, shape, or form. That's Dallas County policy.
And they took off her panties and found that she had been dishonest. And then they paraded her in front of the men. The men were calling her names, harassing her, masturbating in front of her. They forced her to shower in front of the men, though she had contacted her lawyer and she was going to be bailed out within hours. They made her shower, which is abnormal. And they did just all of these things specifically to tear her down and to harass her for being transgender.
Oh, wow. See, I didn't know those details. That's awful.
There was one after another policy, just line by line by line, they violated.
So as part of this lawsuit, are the officers who conducted this, are they named in specifically as part of this? I don't know if you know
I
that.
haven't actually seen the lawsuit, but my understanding is that the sheriff herself, Lupe Valdez, is named, and I believe that the specific people involved are as well, and some other actors that are kind of higher up in the bureaucracy as well.
Yeah, so
it's a multi-party suit.
Yeah, and will probably get settled because.
Well, I hope so, because in my opinion on that is it should have already been settled. So yes, there's a policy in place. Now, I would argue that the policy isn't even great. Had the policy been followed, Dallas County's policy, it still isn't great for transgender people, and I'm going to work on trying to get a better policy in place for the Sheriff's Department. But the point is that the policy is there, and it was not followed. And it was not followed because of a lack of training and because of a lack of supervision. And those are issues that are financial issues that we need to talk to the county commissioners about. But they need to be fixed. And so the sheriff, from my perspective, the Sheriff's Department should have come out and said, we've been made aware of this issue. It was a problem. These are individual bad actors who will be reprimanded, by which I mean at least fired, if not fired and prosecuted. And we will make this matter better. We will take care of the person that we've harmed, and we'll do it however we need to, right? Mm-hmm. The suit should never have been filed, in my opinion. It should have been taken care of as soon as the Sheriff's Department knew there was a problem, and it wasn't.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing that hasn't happened is training. You put a policy like this in place. I read the policy. It's 9 pages long. I read the policy, and it makes sense to me, but I understand transgender issues.
Right. And I'm talking to the Sheriff's Department also about training. I've done some training with DPD. Mm-hmm. I'm scheduled to do more training with DPD. I'm going to talk to I have talked to Sheriff's Department about trying to do some training with them. The issue with that, though, is in general you only have access to new recruits, and specific to the Sheriff's Department, you really only have access to new sworn deputies. And the jailers are not sworn deputies. They're civilians. They're civilian contract or whatever. They're employees of the county, but they're not
working for a company.
Right. We need to
still be trained.
You can, but that's just not the way it's set up today.
Well, they can set it up.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
In some of the stories that I heard from some other transgender people who were treated exactly the same way, some of the jailers didn't seem to even quite understand what a transgender person is.
It's a person, generally.
Well,
I mean, what is a fat person? What is a bald person? These are all adjectives, David.
I get that. But when they were asking Valerie, well, why don't you have a uterus?
Right.
I mean, there are lots of reasons, like you said, Patty. There are lots of reasons not to have a uterus. How's yours, by the way?
hey, my last one of my semi-lady parts were fine.
No, that's good.
And I happen to have them, but a lot of women don't.
A lot of
For a
women
lot
don't.
of different reasons.
Yes.
And that there should never
Josh
have
doesn't
been...
have his.
There should never have been a question, well, why not?
Right.
Just
That's what got
stop.
me.
I don't have a uterus.
That's all
No
that matters.
uterus.
Right.
Boom. Done.
We don't have to
Next.
worry about this one having a period
Next
while she's
question.
in jail.
Right.
Moving
and that's
on.
the reason for that.
Do you have a
question.
spleen? Do
Right.
you have a... I mean,
Right.
you know, they could go through a lot of different things. It's not their business. Why?
Right.
You could have been born without one.
Exactly.
That's
in fact,
not...
she was born without one.
She was born without one.
So was I.
You know?
It's
So...
terrible.
I mean, they're not going to ask some man, why don't you have a testicle?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, you'd be surprised. There are actually transgender men who have come forward and said that they were mistreated in the jail as well,
The
in
same
the
way.
very same ways, but they were paraded around in front of the women because ultimately the county, and this I know for a fact, even though it directly violates PREA, the county does in fact choose your housing based on your genitalia at bottom. At the end of the day, if you have a penis, you are not being housed with women. And if you have a vagina, you are not being housed with men. No matter what, case closed in
Wow.
discussion.
And one transgender woman said they gave her a piece of paper. If she would sign that she was either gay or had HIV, they would put her in a special pod. Well, she's dating a man, so she doesn't consider herself to be gay. She doesn't have HIV, so she wouldn't sign it. I mean, here she is panicking about having been arrested on, again, charges that were thrown out. And she's being asked to sign this paper. What's going to happen? I sign the paper, and then they can prosecute me for lying
All right.
to the county.
But then on the other side, the only way she was maybe guaranteed safety was to sign it.
But
Right.
that's wrong.
Which is wrong.
Yeah.
But,
You should be guaranteed safety no matter
right.
where you are in the
Right.
Dallas County Jail. That's...
And it's an equality issue. I'd hate for anybody to be listening to this and thinking, "Oh, well, transgender people are trying to get special treatment." No, we're trying to get equal treatment. Straight cisgender people are in the jail safely. I mean, this isn't prison.
They're not paraded around like Valerie was
Correct.
and a couple of
Naked.
the others were.
They're not harassed. They're not degraded. They're not dehumanized. They don't leave. They're suicidal.
So, because of this, I know you're about to leave in a few, but because of this, you're no longer with Dallas County.
Well, because of this and some other things, I don't want it to sound like, you know, this happened and all of a sudden I decided to quit a job that I've been at for 3.5 years. It was a situation where I was looking around for other work opportunities for a number of reasons, and I had decided to stay with the county, or at least that was my inclination, until I read this article. And when I read this article about Val, which was the day before the election, I was furious, and I started posting on Facebook everywhere. And I'd been in trouble in the past for certain things that I'd posted on Facebook related to my activism, so I felt like I needed to apologize for that. And then later, you know, I kind of felt like it's terrible that I should apologize for such things, and I felt like if I'm going to take on the county and fight for justice for trans people, I don't need to be employed by the county at the same time. So just kind of all these pieces fell into the puzzle, and I did resign that Tuesday, election day. I slept on it. I turned in my resignation first thing that morning, and it was very strategic to do it at the very beginning of the day rather than later in the day, because I didn't want anybody to be confused about maybe it had something to do with the election. John Crusoe ended up being elected. At the time, I had no idea, and I think John Crusoe will be a fine DA. I think Faith Johnson is an amazing person to work for. She's wonderful. I love her, but I couldn't work for the agency that puts people into that jail, into the hands of these monsters.
So, just real quick before we go to a break and before you have to take off, the president, who I'm grateful for, as well as him being grateful for himself this weekend.
That's what he's thankful for. Is
Oh my
We'll talk
God.
about that after the break.
He's thankful for his great hair.
He wants to rush a decision to the Supreme Court about the
Trans-military ban?
Trans-military, the ban, yes.
Right.
Why can't we do that?
Well, so generally speaking, there are very few methods by which the Supreme Court can hear a case. Just the way that it's set up. It's got to be a case that's either gone through the state court process to the state Supreme Court, or it's gone through the federal court process up through the
circuit courts.
The Supreme Court, generally speaking, does not want to be in the business of being an advisory board. And there are courts that will do that. There are courts that will issue advisory opinions for certain things. Here in the state of Texas, the Attorney General, I worked with the Attorney General for a time, they issue advisory opinions all of the time. The Supreme Court doesn't want to get into that business because they're already overworked. You know, they've got the 9 of them, and they have thousands of cases that are submitted, and they choose, you know, however many that they do. And
a handful. It's
very few.
50 in a year, something like that. At most.
Right. And that's enough to keep them beyond busy. And so,
and they usually wait for a case to become, quote, ripe.
Exactly. And so generally speaking, yeah, if this ban were to go to the Supreme Court, the proper channel would be somebody who's excluded from work. So somebody who's suffering employment discrimination based on the transgender military ban, or somebody who can otherwise show harm. So, I mean, it could be a general saying, hey, you're taking away some of my people that are my best people, or whatever. Somebody that's harmed by the thing, or thinks that harm is imminent when it passes, then they would file a case in federal court, and it would move up the chain. Now, the exception to that is something that's just very imminent and very time-sensitive, like the Bush-Gore
And that's the
issue.
last time the Supreme Court took a case just to start.
My understanding, yes, and to my recollection, I don't remember anything since then. But I don't know, honestly, the method by which he's presenting this, because I don't know if there is a controversy, so to speak. He's, I think, just asking permission to do a thing, right? Does he have somebody who's opposing him?
Well, doesn't it say in the Constitution that if Trump wants it, he can get it? Because
I don't think that amendment's been passed yet. I think they're still drafting the language.
Confused, yeah, I'm getting confused. Jayla, I want to thank you for being here. I know
Thanks
you
so
have to
much.
rush off.
Thank you guys.
Come
It's
back.
been fun. Yeah, I'd
No, you
love
have to
to.
come back,
This is the
please.
first time I've been on radio. This is fabulous. I don't even have to worry about what my hair looks like.
Everybody is seeing
But it looks
You were
fabulous, by the
standing
way.
close to the microphone. You're listening to Lambda Weekly on 89.3 Knon FM. We'll be back with more right after this.
Hi, this is Valletta Lil, and I listen to Lambda Weekly. I hope that you will too.
And this is Lambda Weekly. I'm Dave Taffet here in the studio with Lerone Landis and the late Patti Fink. So what were you thankful for Thanksgiving?
I was thankful I didn't hear Trump's speech to the conference call with the military, because it was chock full of just junk.
And Lerone?
No, the usual. My family, friends, health.
And at our table, we went around the table and each person said, I'm thankful for myself. And you should all be thankful for me too.
Well, I'm actually thankful for my family. I'm thankful for Aaron, for my family as well. I was being facetious. But I'm not, and I'm thankful for you too, David, even if you thanked yourself.
Well, see, I think
Not for the same reasons, but, you know.
And that's what we did at our dinner table. I'm thankful for myself, and all of you should be thankful for me too. So, for anybody who didn't hear, that is the gist of what Trump said.
It was
when
disgusting.
He was asked, what are you thankful for? Yeah.
It's disgusting.
There's so much that comes out, and you read the headlines, and you're thinking, "Oh, that's a joke." No, it's real.
Yeah, this was one where everybody, when you were explaining it, no, really, that's what Trump said.
That's what he really
That's
said.
what he said. No, that's
That's what
really
he
is what he said.
Wow.
Yeah, it's bad. It's the most disgusting thing. And I saw video footage yesterday of what President Obama did on his last Thanksgiving in office. And this was just exemplary of what his whole administration was like. And presidents before him. Mm-hmm. He went to a shelter, and his entire family, including his mother-in-law, went to a shelter in D.C. and served Thanksgiving dinner to the people in the shelter. Mm-hmm. And his message to the country was about being thankful for the bounty of our country, mm-hmm. and that we have each other, and really normal human things.
And you know what? I know you don't care for Trump the way I do.
That's clear.
But had Trump said something like, well, I'm thankful for our troops,
That would have been
just something,
Yeah.
wouldn't you have said, oh, okay, good.
But there's no way he's going to say anything like that.
He doesn't know how
He
to.
railed against migrants. He railed against Congress. He railed against the Supreme Court. He railed against everyone who doesn't think like him, and they were causing him not to get his way. And there were many, in fact, high-ranking military officers who were, in fact, disagreeing with him because he kind of put them on the spot to agree with him, and they said no. And they said the looks on their faces were just of shock that he was. And he asked one officer who's stationed in Afghanistan if he was enjoying his time there. Are you enjoying yourself? This is not a sane human being that is living in the White House. It's not.
Wow.
That was,
I'm just marinating what you just said. Are you serious?
Yes.
there was an indication.
On top of saying I'm thankful for me.
Yeah, there was an indication of that from the beginning, that he doesn't even really understand what being president is. When he was talking about, I have all these new Twitter followers. Yes, you're president of the United States. People are interested in what you're going to say. It doesn't mean they're following you because they're your fan.
This is what happens when you elect a celebrity. Well, not just a celebrity, but a reality star.
A pathologically...
as president.
I wouldn't say celebrity even.
But yeah,
Reagan.
Reagan was a celebrity, but at least Reagan had some experience and had some common sense before he became president. He was a governor.
He was governor for 8 years.
Yeah, so
he understood how government worked. He knew what
exactly.
he was doing. He was qualified to be
exactly.
president. We're not talking about policies.
No. Yeah, you can disagree with policies, but do you know what you're doing?
And this idiot in the White House doesn't even understand that the Department of Justice is not his consigliere, that off to do his bidding and to protect him, as he puts it. He actually says that a lot. They're not protecting me. And that's why he got rid of Sessions. He was angry and said so very clearly to reporters that Sessions' recusal was pissing him off. And he wanted somebody in there who would protect him from being found out, I assume. So he doesn't even understand that basic thing. And every day is a new low.
And that's why you should be thankful for me.
I'm always thankful for you, David.
Oh, thank you, Patty. Oh, gosh.
What else in the news this week?
You were talking about Trump talking to some of the troops in Afghanistan. I have a cousin who's going to be sent to Afghanistan in January, I believe.
Wow.
Fortunately, he's a helicopter mechanic, and he'll be not on the front line, but he'll be at the base, which is pretty secure.
Knock on something.
Yes, we're worried.
Hopefully.
Yes, we're worried.
Yeah.
When you have a maniac who's in charge of the army. So, although it seems like they're doing a good job of keeping Trump uninvolved. And they're running the army the way it should be run. So, he's not worried about going, but the rest of us are. So. I
have a non-gay story, and I'm curious of what you all think about. Have you seen this? It's been on the news all over social media about this Christian missionary who attempted to approach this very protected, still uninhabited island, and he was killed. And everyone is going on and pretty much in defense of. It's an island right off the coast of India, and it is a protected island. It's one of maybe that they're saying about 100 tribes around the world that are still, closed off from the rest of the world, and they want to remain that way.
And many of which are in the Amazon.
A lot in the Amazon, exactly. So a lot of people agree with that. But just kind of what y'all thought about it.
A lot of people agree with what?
Agree with the guy who got killed.
That he should have gone there?
That he shouldn't have gone there.
They
he was
with him having gone there.
Well, some of the Christian groups are saying now those island people should be taken care of. Like, they should have to pay for killing this man. It's like, no, he knew, this is how colonialism starts. Or, he knew it's a protected island. They had every right to protect their island. A lot of people agree with that.
I don't think he should have gone.
Yeah, he should have gone.
I don't think he should have gone. And
yeah.
It's pretty galling to me, really, really pretty galling to me, that there are those who are missionaries, and I say that with air quotes, who feel like they have to change people to be like what they want them to be.
Exactly.
And would disturb a community that wants to be isolated.
They want to be isolated, and you know what?
It's arrogant to me.
It is arrogant, and if somebody was coming towards our shores that we didn't want there, we would defend our country. They had every right to defend themselves.
We would never do that. I mean, that would involve building a wall. It would involve keeping out immigrants. We would never do those things. It would involve sending troops to the border.
Well, we really can't relate because we live on stolen land.
That's true.
That's exactly, yeah. But anyway, I just thought it was interesting.
That is an interesting story. I didn't realize, I had heard the story that he was killed. I didn't hear the part of it because I didn't read a complete story. I just
he was going to preach the word of Christ to them.
Okay.
They didn't want to hear it.
So many people die in the name of preaching the name, we have the Crusades, they couldn't handle that. It's just, wiped out a country.
Exactly.
But it's still, to me, the same sort of arrogance. Like, there were stories years ago about how the Church of Latter-day Saints had, been going after, deceased Jews, wanting to convert them after the fact. And that's just so arrogant. It's just so arrogant that you would muck with other people who have nothing to do with you.
And who've made it clear they don't want you to come to... they haven't been invited.
Right. It's the whole thing is just insane. I'm sorry the guy's dead.
Yeah,
I'm sorry he got killed.
Yeah.
But I don't think... I think he was in the wrong for going there under those pretenses.
And he was warned. As a lot of people have been warned, don't go to this island. It is protected. They don't want any intruders. And, I also read, when I was reading about this, apparently, when people from the modern world go inside these otherwise uninhibited tribes, over 90% of them die due to disease that we bring in. So we're not even, you're not even thinking about that.
Yeah, I just think he was out of place.
Yeah, very much so.
The first part of our show, we were talking about Transgender Day of Remembrance. In Dallas Voice this week, we did a story about the Nicholas West murder. He was murdered 25 years ago in Tyler. And it's an interesting story in that that's the case where our hate crime law stemmed from. And it was the first time that a police department in the state of Texas took an anti-gay hate crime seriously. They arrested 3 people in the murder. 2 of them were given the death penalty. Tammy, who's the editor of The Voice, she had interviewed one of them in prison before he was put to death.
I remember watching that on TV. Yeah. I do a lot of true crime. And I watched one of those cases, and I thought, oh, this is the Nicholas West case. Well, lo and behold, on my TV was Tammy Nash. I'm like, oh my God, Aaron, pause. Aaron, come in here. Watch this. And it's because he reached out to her as he was approaching his execution date.
Right. Yeah. But it is the first time they solved the murder. One of the assailants is still in prison, and he's not one of the ones who actually physically committed the murder, so he was part of the kidnapping.
So where did he get life?
Yeah. A few years ago, there was an anti-trans murder in Tyler, and we were calling the Tyler Police Department. Tyler Police Department did a great job of keeping us informed of where the investigation was. Even told us, don't say anything, but we're close to an arrest. And again, it was one of those murders where it was an ex-boyfriend who shot her, and she was driving and crashed into a telephone pole or something and died from her injuries. But again, the Tyler Police Department stepped up, took the hate crime or the anti-trans murder, took it very seriously, and solved the case within a couple of weeks. The national groups, I remember, were just screaming about what's going on in Texas. And I was in touch with a couple of them, and I said, "Would you shut up? They're close to an arrest, and you're not helping." So sometimes those kinds of things don't help. Sometimes it does pay to just work with the police, because they're the ones who can do something about it and stop screaming at the police. We were talking about how we really need to be working more and talking about some of the good things the police do. There are some police departments, the Dallas Police Department is a good example of that, where they take these crimes very seriously. Mm-hmm. When those two trans women were found dead, one was a murder, one we think was a suicide, but it was within a week of each other. Dallas police were...
They were on it.
They were not just on it, but calling anybody and everybody that they could to say, help us with this. So, some people say, well, they're the police department. They should be doing... No, they need your help. If you know anything.
Yeah, of course.
They're there to make the arrest, but they can't do that without information from people. Anyway, next week our guest is... We're a few minutes early, but our guest is... Our guests are from the Teddy Bear Party, which is one of my favorite parties of the year. Mm-hmm. We collect teddy bears for the kids at Children's Hospital, so that any kid that's going to go through chemotherapy or anything like that gets a teddy bear.
Yeah, we participated in that last night. Gabrielle helped pack up some of those bears. Mm-hmm. It was fun.
Yeah. That was one of Brian's favorite parties. So, we were shopping for teddy bears, and he said, well, they still have some more. And I said, but we can't carry any more right now. And he said, but what if a kid needs one?
Yeah.
So last year I cleaned out the teddy bears in 5 Walgreens instead of just the one that Brian and I did. We'll be doing that again. And then the week after that we have Jessica Gonzalez, who was elected to be a new state representative. You're planning on going to the swearing-in?
That's my plan, yes.
I'm planning on going too. It's always fun.
Yeah, I don't know if Aaron can go, because they have the week before it's on a Tuesday, and the week before that, of course, is January 1st, and so they're not going to have county commissioners court that day, so I'll probably have to be there for that. But I'm looking forward to it. It's supposed to be from 9 to 12 mm-hmm. on Tuesday the 8th. Mm-hmm. And we have so many folks who will be sworn in. There's 150 of them. I guess they have to get sworn in. Mm-hmm. But, certainly Jessica Gonzalez, Julia Johnson from Dallas County, John Turner, who's my new rep, mm-hmm. will be sworn in. Ana Maria Ramos will be sworn in. Retta Bowers. So we have quite a few. Mm-hmm. Carl Sherman.
We have 5 new representatives from Dallas County.
Uh-huh.
So.
Well, yes, absolutely. Mm-hmm. And all unseated sitting Republicans. Mm-hmm. So we'll get some change. Mm-hmm. And we have 5 lesbians now in the Texas legislature.
Awesome.
Let's put it this way. 5 openly LGBT people.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
And quite a number more in the United States Congress.
Yeah, when I asked Mary Gonzalez about that. Mary identifies as pansexual. I can't say what her answer was, but she said to me, "No, I don't give a..."
And congrats to Mary. She's co-chairing the Mexican American caucus mm-hmm. in the Texas House with our very own Rafael Anchia, mm-hmm. Representative Rafael Anchia, who's been on this show many times.
Yes, he has.
So for all of us here at Lambda Weekly, have a good week and a good first week after Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Is that a thing?
The end of November. So
there you go.
Uh-huh. And we'll see you all next week.